Welcome back, everybody, to the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your other host, Samantha.
And that's right, everybody. We are back with a brand new episode for you guys. And I just want to start off by saying Happy New Year to everybody. That's right, everyone. We are in 2023. And as the release of this episode, it's actually going to be Friday the 13th, which, I mean, hey, like, that's a perfect time to have an episode, right?
And that also happens to be my birthday, guys.
That's right, everybody. It is Samantha's birthday. So wish Samantha happy birthday. Samantha, happy birthday. Hope you have a great one. We'll see what's going on, here in California. If you guys live here, you guys might know. You guys are obviously living through it just like us. Or for those of you that don't live in California, you may have seen the news. We're being hit with a pretty severe, storm. And our specific location, it hasn't been too bad, but, up north, for us, it's San Francisco area, it is pretty bad. So, best wishes to everybody over there, stay safe. If you have family over there, check up on them. And yeah, guys, the weather is one of the scariest things there is. We cannot control the weather. We can't, best we can do is sort of predict it. And yeah, so everybody stay safe out there. But nonetheless, Samantha, happy birthday and happy Friday the 13th.
Thank you.
So we have a very special episode for you guys, just like we always do, right? But before we get into that, any announcements, Samantha?
I will be going back to school pretty soon, so you won't be seeing me in the future episodes until I figure out my schedule. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, so just like I'm pretty sure, some of you guys might be going back to school, right? So it's going to take some adjustment, right, to see exactly how we are going to work around Samantha's schedule. But, we did this before already. You guys seen, we had a couple episodes where it was just me and without Samantha. And regardless, we're going to see how we could schedule. And, there were times where we had episodes when Samantha was at school and so she wasn't physically here, which I don't think anybody really noticed that. So, yeah, regardless, we're going to make it work. And, that's what we always do. So if there isn't anything else, I do want to introduce our topic for today's episode, which is haunted houses. More specifically, the Hospicio Cabañas and haunted house stories. Our story begins in 1796 with the arrival of the Spanish bishop Juan Cruz Ruiz de Cabañas in Guadalajara, Mexico. He arrived with the goal of creating a home for orphan children, those with disabilities, the poor, and all others who found themselves as outcasts in society. This wouldn't be the first time a Spaniard came to Mexico with the idea of bettering the people. And in case you couldn't tell, I used air quotes with that one. But nonetheless, his intentions were pure. To his luck, there was already a pre-existing building that worked as a church, orphanage, and workhouse that was in dire need of renovation. Thus, Cabañas reached out to a renowned Spanish architect by the name of Manuel Tolsa to commission the construction of this project. Construction of the Hospicio soon began. Tolsa was inspired by Baroque architecture such as El Escorial in Madrid and would soon create a beautiful neoclassical building. Finally, in 1810, construction was completed and the building became known as Casa de la Caridad y la Misericordia, or the House of Charity and Compassion. Once opened, it served its intended purposes, but not for long, as later that year, the Mexican War of Independence soon began. As a result, the building soon became the headquarters for the city's colonial army. In 1821, with the end of the War of Independence, Hospicio Cabañas, named after Juan Cruz Ruiz de Cabañas, returned to its former glory. There are rumors that at some point the building was also used as an insane asylum, but I was unable to verify this as a 100% fact. In 1937, the state of Jalisco commissioned artist Jose Clemente Orozco to paint the inside of the Hospicio's chapel. From 1937 to 1939, Orozco painted a total of 57 frescoes in the chapel, with its most notable being El Hombre de Fuego, or the Man on Fire. This fresco depicts a man centered and painted in red, standing above men that seem to be holding on to each other as if forming a sort of circle, all looking away. These men are also painted in black and gray, giving off a sort of gloomy look. I will say that this painting does give off a religious feel, and it makes you think of who this man on fire is supposed to be. The frescoes are said to portray different events from Mexico's history, as well as offer the artist's interpretation of the future. In 1980, the Hospicio Cabañas' concentration changed once again, and it was now declared to be dedicated to the arts. And ultimately, in 1997, it was officially a part of the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites, and is now also known as the Museo Cabañas. If you feel so inclined, you could even visit the Hospicio and enjoy modern and contemporary art exhibits.
Now let's get into the haunting of Hospicio Cabañas. Back when the place was used as an orphanage, it is believed that there was a clock that would stop working anytime a child would pass away. The legend of this clock explains that the devil would trap the souls of the children inside of the clock, and those said souls were the ones that haunted the building. Others believe that the devil didn't just trap the children in this clock, but that the devil tormented them before the child either passed away or even before the child killed them itself. This is pretty crazy legend surrounding a clock that can no longer be found, let alone seen in the cabaña. And you may wonder, well, why isn't it there no more? It's believed that the workers were all so disturbed by this clock that it was removed to seize any of the eerie feeling it gave many of the staff. So yeah, this clock was said to hold all these souls of the children that were tormented. Like, come on, these children were orphans. Like, they had a really tough life, right?
Right.
And so you have to think about just like the feeling that was just like the souls and like the spirits in this building and what they were feeling and how upset they were.
Yeah, so I can just imagine like the energy itself. Like, I mean, like I was mentioning in the history, right? It was been used as an orphanage and a hospital and, you know, as even headquarters for the army. And then all of a sudden it's an art museum. So you could think like this thing already has so much history, because before it was even transformed into how we know it as today, as like the Hospicio Cabañas, it was already one before, you know? So this, Cabañas came in, and it's not like he just like built it from the ground up. Like, it was already a building that was being used as an orphanage already, as a church, and, you know, as like this home basically for people who were kind of just sent away by society. So it already had that history way before Cabañas even came. But when he came, you know, he made it a lot better. So you can imagine that maybe at this point they could hold even more orphans, and it was just a breeding ground for, like, I don't want to say like misery per se, but like just for like hurt, you know, like these kids, obviously they were neglected in one way or another, or they just lost their parents, you know. And that's the thing. It's sad because as a child, you shouldn't be going through these sort of things.
Exactly. And with this history, you can understand why this place is like considered one of the most haunted places, not in just like Mexico, but in all of the Americas. Like, it's considered one of the most haunted places you could visit.
Right. And on top of that, I want to add this, that it's also known as like one of the oldest, and if not, you know, like the oldest alone, it's also one of the biggest like hospitals of like the Americas, basically, like, or in the New World, I guess you could say, right? I don't want to use that terminology, or I mean, I don't like to use that terminology, but that's how people know it as. So it's, for sure, it's jam-packed with all this history.
So let's get into some examples of paranormal events people have experienced when they visit this place. There have been accounts of seeing these children, these like orphans, just walking around. But that's just like, okay, maybe that's just some random child. Obviously, like, people aren't sure, like, aren't going to be like, oh, that's a ghost. That has to be a ghost or something.
Yeah, no, I get it.
The strangest part about like these apparitions that these people see is that the children have completely black eyes.
Oh no, black-eyed children?
Yes.
Black-eyed children, orphan ghosts.
But I think the scariest thing that I guess people have seen in like different with these children is that they've had glowing red eyes.
Yeah, no, see, like, this just tops it off. So they're known to have black eyes and glowing red eyes?
Yes. So I guess some people say like, oh, I've seen them with black eyes, I've seen them with red eyes. It just depends. Like,
yeah, I don't think anything but normal colored eyes. Yeah. I think that's probably like just to the max. Like, it just takes it to a whole nother level.
Like, imagine you're just at this museum, just chilling, looking at some beautiful art, a beautiful mural, and you just look to the side. This random kid is just staring at you with these bright red eyes.
You're just like looking over, like, have you seen the meme of like the Popeyes kid? Yeah. He's just like recording him, and the kid's just holding the cup, like giving like the side eye, like, why are you recording me?
Like, that's scary.
Yeah, no. And I just always think that, like, obviously, like, you know, ghost in a certain situation is scary, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we've talked about good ghosts, you know, I guess you could say, or, you know, evil spirits or bad ghosts. So I think it's inherently like you tend to assume like, oh, that's probably like a nice spirit, right, or a good spirit when you think it's a kid. But I feel like when you think of like demons and like evil spirits, we tend to assume that it's an adult or something like that, right? I feel like it makes it even scarier, or somehow it makes it worse knowing that like this is a child, like an evil child spirit or a demon presenting itself as a child. Like I just feel like there's something so inherently scarier about that. And oh my god, I can't imagine just like hanging out with your family or whatever, and then you look over and you're thinking like, well, who's this kid? Why is he by himself? And then he looks over to you, black eye sockets or just glowing red eyes, and you're just like, never mind. they're probably good on their own.
I would be leaving right away, honestly, if I saw anything like that.
Yeah, I could not do that.
So some other haunted occurrences that visitors claim to have experienced is hearing the sounds of screaming children and or just feeling touched. But like not just like touch like, oh, like they touched my shoulder or something. Just touch specifically like from like somewhere above their knees to like at most like the tallest like being like their mid stomach, like places like where children could reach,
right?
basically.
Like the same, like their height basically, right? Okay.
And so another common occurrence is that they feel like a child reach for their hand, or like some small hand reach for their hand and trying to lead them away from wherever they are in the museum, basically.
Right. See, I think that goes back to what we were talking about with like, you know, the nice spirits, because children obviously they're inherently like they're innocent, right? They're not evil. You know, we don't think of a kid as just being evil. Like, you know, I'm of a belief that like this sort of thing is taught, right? So just inherently a child is not going to give off that bad vibe. So it's just kind of like sad to think about like, okay, these kids were orphaned obviously for one way or another. And even in the afterlife, they're trying to, you know, connect with human beings. And we're just assuming, right, like mainly like adults.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad to think like they're trying to, in a sense, I guess maybe, like latch onto like an adult figure in the afterlife.
Yeah, for sure. Like you have to think of like the history with this place, you know, kind of like the story I told you with the clock, how supposedly like the devil would torment them. Like you have to think of just like the anguish these children like possibly went through, and they're kind of just like reaching out. And I think what like the scariest thing is like, imagine like you're in the museum, like it's probably like pretty quiet. I feel like sometimes people are staring at the art and you just hear a child scream, like a tormented scream is what I read too. Like that's scary.
I mean, okay, we could speculate here, right? Like we could say potentially a child screaming is probably like the spirit of like those orphans that were like being tormented, right? They say by the devil. So that's scary to think about in and of itself, right? So, and I also want to offer you like another thing to think about, right? So they say that the clock's not there anymore, right? It's nowhere to be found. Nobody knows where it's at. They speculate that potentially maybe it was one of the workers. They got rid of it. Okay, what if like the children tugging at you and trying to like hold your hand to lead you away? What if they're trying to lead you away from where the clock was supposed to be?
That's a possibility, since you know, like the legend does say like, oh, the devil trapped their soul in there. Maybe they're like, no, you're going, like, don't go near that. Like that's a bad place because of the clock. That could be a reason why. Yeah.
Or here's another one too, right? Let's say it still is like this child leading you, but instead of leading you away from the clock, what if it's one of those with the red eyes or black eyes leading you to the clock?
That's what I was thinking too when you were saying like they're leading you away. I was like, what if they're leading you towards it?
Exactly. So it's, I don't know.
There's a lot of speculation you can make about where the child is leading you.
Exactly. I mean, I like to assume that if it's like I guess a good spirit, like we've been saying, that it would probably do that to you, like lead you away. Whereas I feel like an evil spirit would kind of try to trick you and entice you by like, I don't know, making you want to go see like where like this, I guess where the clock was supposed to be or something like that. So I'd like to think that these children tugging at you are probably the good ones, right? And the innocent ones that were tormented by the devil. I mean, let's hope that this wasn't like the actual case. It's still weird with the whole clock thing. Like I don't see why you would just make that up about the clock stopping every single time an orphan died, which is, man, we just gotta take a second. Like that's just sad.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy to think about. And I mean, I wonder who was like the first person to realize like, man, every time one of our kids die, the clock just stops working.
I think when I was reading like about the clock, it said that like they just noticed the clock would stop working at random times, and I guess maybe someone was just like,
they made the connection
like just as like it continued to happen more and more. So I'm guessing that's possibly what happened. This place is available to anyone that wants to visit. It's just for a really small fee. And even if you don't want to pay on Tuesdays, I was reading people reading it on TripAdvisor. They said like it's free on Tuesdays, but they highly recommend it to take the tour because they said there's a bunch of like cool art. Obviously, the Jose Orozco, the one you were talking about with the murals and everything like that. People said that the tour guides gave really good insight of like just the art and just commented perfectly, told them things that they would have never thought about or they didn't know at all about just the art. And so if you ever want to visit, feel free, go for one of the tours. They have English and Spanish, they said. So yeah.
So like I mentioned, everybody, Jose Orozco, he's actually like a very renowned Mexican artist, and he was commissioned by the state of Jalisco to paint these murals or these frescoes. So I mentioned there was 57 of these all over the chapel of it, and upon my research, I found out that like some call it like the Sistine Chapel of the Americas.
I saw that too.
Which is like it's a pretty cool thing to think about, that like it was honored to like such a high regard, because I personally haven't seen the Sistine Chapel. I just know from seeing pictures and all that it's a beautiful like exhibit of art, and it's painted on like a church, like a chapel, which is same thing that we have here with the Hospicio. But if you guys go check it out, you can see these different depictions of like Mexico's history, as well as the Hombre en Fuego, right? The man on fire. That painting, I wanted to talk about that for a bit.
Okay.
So, if you haven't seen the painting, or if you haven't heard of the Hospicio in general, we have pictures on our Instagram at calaveriapod. So go ahead and check that out. But let's talk about it, right? So the painting itself, as I mentioned, it has like these people like surrounding. Initially, it looked like they were surrounding him, but then I realized that this man that's in the middle, that is said to be on fire, he's actually like above them. And this made me think immediately, right? Talking about like the devil and these sort of things, it made me just, for some reason, my head just went to like, okay, this is the devil and he's above them for some reason. Because the people that are beneath him, they look like, initially I thought they was like, these clergymen or like monks. They were wearing like those robes, and I just thought they were like church people. So I thought like this is kind of like a weird depiction of the devil above like the church, and I thought it was weird because like it's in a church itself.
Yeah.
So like why would you do a sort of thing like that? For sure it looks like it's depicting some sort of evil, because like I mentioned, these people look sad. They look like they're in despair. They're looking away from each other. They're not looking up. They're looking down, and they're painted in all gray. Whereas the man in the middle, he just standing tall. He's on fire for one. And yeah, like you just assume that he's like this powerful being. So what did you take away from the painting?
Originally, when I saw this photo of the painting, it kind of looks like the man in the man on fire, I guess you could say. To me, it looked like he was walking like across a river of fire with these people underneath him. Like it looked like he was just walking over them, and I didn't really think he was like in the middle of them or anything like that. So I can kind of see how you say like it looks like he's above them, because that's kind of how the perspective is when you're looking at this. And I think it is interesting with the whole devil thing and everything like that, and how the people underneath the man, they look sorrowful, like they look just tired and just like they've gone through so much pain. And then the man in the middle, the man on fire, I guess, he's just rising above it all. It makes me curious to see like, is this possibly a depiction of the devil, or what is the man on fire actually depicting?
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to put it bluntly, in my opinion, it literally kind of looks like a depiction of hell, like if you think of like movies where they depict like Greek mythology and like their sort of underworld, is exactly what it kind of looks like. Everybody there for some reason is all the same color. Everybody is like gray, like drained of all energy and color. Whereas like the ruler, Hades, or whoever the heck it is, right? They're like the ones that are ruling the place for one, right? And they're in control, and they're typically in red, just like this man is. And although you can't see his face in the mural, you could just assume like he just kind of has that sort of confidence, because if you look at the way it's painted and like it looks like he's in stride, he's walking, he just looks like a powerful being or person, whatever the heck it may be. So I thought that was interesting, and it's one of the most famous paintings in the entire chapel, because it's like at the center of like this little dome. So, it immediately grabs your attention because it just has so much color, like that color contrast between dark and, the red, the brightness. So I wanted to talk about that for a bit. If we are ever in that area, for sure I want to go visit that. I haven't visited it personally. I know we both haven't. We haven't really been to Mexico in quite a while. But like Samantha said, if you guys are in, the area, this is in Guadalajara, in Jalisco, feel free to check it out. It's not pricey. Check out some cool art. Who knows, maybe you might see a ghost.
Go on Tuesday if you don't want to pay.
Exactly. If you guys are cheap. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being cheap. I'm like that every once in a while too.
I did see some people say that they'll charge you for pictures, but I wasn't sure because I only saw like one person say that. But I mean, it's very cheap, people said.
Yeah, it's Mexico.
Yeah.
If you let them charge you, they're going to charge you.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you got to think smarter. But yeah, I mean, it looks like something like, immediately it doesn't look like something that would be scary. If I saw it from the outside, it wouldn't just...
It just looks like history. That's what it
exactly,
looks like.
And I think that's like probably the most interesting part for me because I love history. And I think I mentioned that in the last episode. History is like is really, really big on me, right? And so I loved researching all this stuff for the episode and seeing that like it wasn't just known as like a haunted house. It has this cultural significance in Mexico's history and in Guadalajara being, one of the biggest cities in Mexico for one. So it's interesting that it's just there, and I never heard about it until I was researching, topics for the episode. And so with that, we'd like to end off by thanking our sources. Thank you to museocabañas.jalisco.gov.mx for the timeline of the Hospicio's history. Thank you to atlasobscura.com for their web post on the Hospicio Cabañas written by user Monsieur Mictlan and edited by users BuffyKane99 and Xavi Javier on April 5th, 2022.
And thank you to ourparanormalworld.com for the article Hospicio Cabañas. And finally, thank you to Robert Bito from the website mexicounexplained.com for the article Ghostly Guadalajara.
And so thank you, everybody. That was the case of the Hospicio Cabañas located in Guadalajara, Mexico. And like we said, everyone, we're not just going to have the case for you guys. We're also going to have some haunted house stories. And just like with the rest of our stories, we have gotten them all from Reddit, all from various paranormal subreddits. So sit back and enjoy. For my 21st birthday, I decided to take a trip to Mexico for a month and just basically explore with family that already lives there. My uncle told me he had a great place in mind in Guadalajara. Mind you, I had no idea of any of its history other than it being a very old building and that it was being used as an art gallery at the time. So my family and I are taking a tour and we're in, I want to say, the main building, which has art all over its walls, and I start taking pictures while the tour guide is talking. There was maybe a single 50-year-old dude, a couple with their sleeping baby in the stroller, and a small group of artsy young adults. As I'm taking these pictures, I start to feel sick and dizzy, and my head started hurting, and I started having really bad anxiety. My heart wouldn't stop racing. I remember asking my uncle where the bathrooms were and even struggling to get there. I ended up throwing up and having to wait for everyone outside. There's this long strip of stores and vendors that you walk through to get to the old building at the end, and I was perfectly fine the entire time before going in. After being out for probably no more than 5 minutes, I remember just sitting on the steps and it all going away like, oh shit, I'm fine. And my uncle just looking at me like, what the fuck, you weird American? Later that day, looking back at pictures, I noticed a kid in white with a glowing thing next to his head in a doorway and just being so confused because there were no kids, and when taking the picture, I made sure not to take pictures of anyone. Plus I remember that doorway being empty. Behind the kid and past him, there are locked iron gates that don't let people wander too much and to keep everyone centered. It was also dead, so the place couldn't have had more than 8 people in the entire place. And just to make sure it wasn't just me, no one in my family saw the other kids, especially all in white and bald. Later on I found out that it was an old hospice and an orphanage at different points. Not sure what happened that day, but I probably wouldn't go back. The art and the painted walls are absolutely beautiful if anyone wants to Google it for themselves. You all just heard Hospicio Cabañas, weird picture of a kid, ? By user, which dick is it? So this person visited the hospicio, and he obviously gets sick and all this, and he's reviewing his photos. And in this photo, he's in the chapel, right? And he's almost like directly underneath that dome that we were talking about, where they have the main like mural that we were referencing about the man on fire. And all the way at the end, it shows like this doorway that he explains, and it has like a little boy.
Okay.
And so here it is.
What the heck?
And
like, you could clearly see it.
Yeah, like it clearly looks like a person, like a human. And I mean, somebody in the comment replied to him and saying like that is literally a child, like it's like actually a person. That's not a ghost. And he says, and he's like, well, the thing is like he explains in the story, right? There was only a sleeping toddler, and that the toddler wouldn't be as tall. And I'm gonna be honest, when I look at it, it does look like a human being. Like it really does. If this is a ghost. Sort of like a spirit apparition, like this is probably one of the best captured ones on camera. And I just think it'd be like, I get it, if I was this person and I see the baby in the stroller, I'm immediately assuming like that baby's not gonna get up, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't assume the kid to be that tall, but I'm gonna say this kid does look very short, so I would see how it could it could be the toddler. I have no idea, obviously I wasn't there, but I think it is interesting how before all this happened, he got sick being in that place. And I think like instantly I'm like, it's the spirits, they're affecting him. He threw up and all this, and that he felt fine after, he left. And it wasn't until after that he catches this. It just reminds me of that time that we visited the mission and I started snapping photos. And then after, when we were eating, I noticed that I had caught that thing, right? And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I actually referenced this in one of the past episodes. So go ahead and listen to those. And I also shared it on our Instagram if you guys are interested. But I think it's interesting. Like, I couldn't tell you definitively if this is a ghost, if this is like the orphan child, or if it really is just that toddler that was there. But I mean, he mentions it was dead, only eight people max.
Yeah.
And like, obviously including him. So like, I feel like it kind of be hard to miss a whole child. And if there is just a kid wandering around like that, it literally looks empty. Like, he caught nobody else in this entire picture. And the picture shows like pretty much the entire hall. If this kid wandered off on his own, his parents, I don't know what they did. They lost their kid, basically, So, I mean, what do you think about it?
I think it's a very interesting photo. You could clearly see the child, especially if you zoom in. You could see like the full silhouette of, I guess, like the spirit. And I feel like he would have noticed if there was just like a random kid just walking around by itself. Yeah.
And you would think too, like he says he asked his family about it. Nobody's seen any other kids. And I feel like he doesn't mention it straight, like flat out. I'm pretty sure he showed his family, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure they could have been like, oh, that was the kid that was there. That was the kid in the stroller. But no, I mean, he doesn't mention anything like that. So it's interesting. I feel like it's very weird given the fact that like the history, they knew nothing about it. Their uncle was just like, hey, let's go to this one place. It's pretty cool. And then you find out after all this happens, after you get sick, after you find this weird random kid that you never seen the entire time that you were there, that, oh, hey, this used to be an orphanage, and yeah, it's haunted. So like, like I could imagine what this person was thinking at that time.
Definitely an interesting story. Now, my story that I'm going to start off with, it's not a story about the actual place we talked about. It's just like a haunted house story. And it comes from the subreddit r/ghost stories by the user Spooky Spunky Art. And it's titled, My Grandma Lived in a Haunted House. A Redditor has read some of my experiences with ghosts and asked about some of my family's experiences. The following was told to me from my grandma, my mom's mother. My grandma and her family used to live in a small area in Tennessee. Her parents, sibling, and her moved into an old farmhouse in the 50s. I asked her how old she thought the house was, like a specific date, but she said she didn't know, but that it was definitely old. In the night, they would hear a door open and shut in the house, all night long, along with the sound of a cat screeching. Finally, her dad had enough and removed the hinges and replaced them with leather hinges to see if that would stop the door from opening and shutting. It didn't. It still kept doing it. Opening, shutting, and then the sound of a cat screeching. Also under this house was enough room for her and her siblings to play underneath. The house was set up high on stones. There was no skirting under the home, and it was just open. Someone had tried to build a cellar but never finished connecting it to the home. Every day they went down there. they would find balls of long hair that looked grayish, most likely from a woman's head. And underneath the hair was coins or change. They would just toss the hair and keep the coins. Again, no explanation for this. One day, my grandma's mom got sick, so my great-great-grandma, which is my grandma's mom's mother, came over to help with the kids and help her daughter. Interesting side fact, my great-great-grandma was Cherokee, but she would never ever admit to it if asked. She would always just claim Black Dutch. She was terrified of being taken to Oklahoma to a reservation. Anyways, great-great-grandma only stayed one night, and she was ready to leave before the sun came up. My grandma asked her mom why she was leaving, to which she replied, "I seen a man and his wife pass through the dresser and into the wall. The wife was missing her head. I ain't staying in this house." She left and she never came back to the house. Across from the house where they lived, and across a road, was an open field. In the field was a large, 3-story home, a rancher-type house. In its heyday, it must have been beautiful, but now it looked like it was weathered. The paint was peeling and it just looked like it had seen better days. Every night on the top floor, in one of the windows, everyone could see a candlelight flickering. Grandma's dad was curious one day, during sunlight of course. He walked over to the old house to see where the light could be coming from, and if anyone was living there. The kids came along. Great-grandpa walked inside, and on the inside it looked worse, and there was no way someone could go upstairs to the top floor, because the stairs had rotted away. Meanwhile, Grandma's half-sister went to the cellar door of the old house and opened it. Down in the cellar was an old, tacky-looking man, and he looked up and said to her, "Come on in." Her sister slammed the door and ran. There were no steps that led into the cellar. I don't think they ever went back over to that rancher house again. They stayed in their house from when my grandma was 8 till she was 11, and then the family moved. And that's that story.
Okay, that is creepy. That's just like a series of like different events, just like one after another. And I feel like those are like the accumulation is just kind of scary. You know, it's just as scary as maybe say like a demon or a poltergeist tormenting you, because you could see how it goes from like one little thing to like the next to just escalating to literally seeing full-on apparitions.
Yeah.
Like the person that opened the door for her or like was at like standing there at the door and she like obviously got scared and slammed it, right? I don't blame her.
Mm-hmm. So I think I found the part where they said like they always just every night just heard like a door opening and shutting. I feel like that's kind of like where it starts getting like, what is that noise? Like, why is that happening? They try to solve it with some leather hinges. Maybe it's going to stop it from moving and creaking. We wouldn't hear it as much, but then it still continued to happen. And then the hair and like the unfinished cellar underneath, like that's pretty weird. I know someone tried like explaining it in the comments, like, oh, maybe it was a crow that was doing that. Like or like maybe it's like a cat hair that was like a cat hairball and everything like that. But like the person like responded like it was like a long gray hair, and then like the change was just always underneath it for some reason. Like there's always just coins underneath it, and that kind of made me think of like witchcraft almost.
Yeah, right.
Because it sounds very like it sounds too weird for like that combination to be together all the time, you know?
Yeah. And
then like the next thing, like the house across them with the candlelight always there, they go to investigate, and like you said, like they open like one of like the grandma's half sister opens the cellar door, they look in, they just see a man there, and the man just tells them, "Come on in." Yeah. But there's no way for the man to like even get down there. There's no stairs, there's no nothing. Like, I would close the door too. Yeah, he's just there staring at her like, "Hi, come on in."
Just think like one of two things. Like either that's a ghost or that's just somebody trapped down there that's just in a really good mood. Like, what's going on?
Definitely very weird experiences for that house. Like I know their grandma told them like it's just a really old house that they lived in. They didn't know how old it was. They moved in the 50s. So you could think about just like possibly like the history with that house and everything like that. Yeah,
for sure. That is one experience that I do not want, that, you know, there's other people can have that. I know there's people out there that want to experience something. I used to be able to like, I used to say that I would want to see something too, right? But I've just come to accept that like, if it's not for me, it's not for me, right? I've had my different experiences and I'm okay with that. I definitely don't want to experience anything like that because I just feel like I'll end up going crazy.
Same here.
Okay, and so my next story is by the user My Darling Darkness, and it is from the subreddit r/paranormal, and it is titled, "The quote fake haunted house I work at is actually haunted." For 12 years, I've worked as an actor for a local haunted house attraction. It's a lot of fun as I get to play a variety of horror characters and act out different scenes. While the tours we put on are clearly fake, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that isn't. I should start off by explaining that the building we do this out of is extremely old and was once an elementary school. We gutted the section of the building that was classrooms and constructed it to be what we needed. This is when we actually started having weird experiences. There's plenty of activity that can be shrugged off, such as feeling watched and hearing footsteps when no one's there. Then there are things that are not so easy to disregard, such as one evening, a member was working on hooking up our sound system by himself. He had not even hooked up the large speakers yet when he stated that a loud, deep growl came booming through them. This terrified him so much, he ran out of the building and would not go back in even to lock up until another member came down to go in with him. He never worked alone in the building again. Other activities seems playful and childlike, such as hearing small giggles and whispering in the halls and in rooms that are empty. One year, I was in a rocking chair that I would jump out of as a group came through. The thing about the rocking chair is that it was more like a glider and it was broken. I would have to use a lot of force to get the rocking chair to rock back and forth. It was right before our show time and I was sitting in the broken chair getting mentally pumped for the night ahead. I was completely alone when I felt someone grab onto the back of the chair and harshly pull it backwards. I felt myself flying backwards with the chair and honestly, I thought I would flip out of it. Thankfully, this did not happen, and as soon as I stabilized myself, I jerked to see who had done this. The room I was in was large and no one could get out of this room without me seeing them running away in the split second it took me to look behind. There was absolutely no one there and I was suddenly covered in goosebumps. No one was even in the area around my room. Later that same night, the lights were off, and a group had just left my room when I noticed a small figure in the far right of the corner of the room. It looked like a small child crouching down looking my way, and I was immediately worried that a child had been left behind from the previous group. As I headed towards the figure to ask if they were okay, the strobe flashed and the figure was completely gone. This same year, but a different night, I was again sitting in my chair waiting for the next group when someone or something growled right into my ear. It was so loud that it caused my ear to ring, and when I turned to see what it was, there was nothing but an empty room. I changed rooms the next year and did not experience as much creepy phenomenon. There's not much history I've been able to find out about the building, but I'm so curious as to what could be causing all this weirdness. This is only a tiny bit of what has been experienced over the years working there, and I don't feel it will be stopping anytime soon. So what do you think about that haunted house?
Definitely puts a new spin on the actual haunted house, I guess, because sure, we think of haunted houses when we go get scared, but that's an actual place that's a haunted house, but there's also a haunted house. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, actually.
No, yeah, I get you. I think that's part of the reason why I chose the story, because we're doing haunted house stories, right? So when I seen that somebody was talking about a fake haunted house, right, that you go to get scared at, and it actually turns out to be haunted, I thought that's a perfect plot for a movie or something, And who knows? There might be a movie out there about that. I haven't seen it personally. It might be one of those cult classics, but for sure, I thought it was very interesting, which is why I chose it.
Definitely an interesting take on, I guess, the fake haunted house stories that are not even just stories, but I guess it's just definitely different from stories you often hear about. On to my next story, though. This next story comes from the subreddit r/ghost stories from the user KitKat1032. It's titled Nursing Home / Former Orphanage Haunting. Hi, I used to work food services in a nursing home that was converted from an orphanage. This happened a few weeks after I unfortunately witnessed a resident have a medical emergency and pass. I don't know if it was this resident specifically, as a lot of people passed in the building, and there was a cemetery directly outside the restaurant that was used when the building was an orphanage. Anyways, I'm minding my own business and getting ready to lock up and closing out tables on the POS when the lights in the dining room go out. I got a really bad feeling, but left it alone because I had to turn the lights off anyways. So I bring the dirty linen back to the kitchen with me and lock the pantry. When I turn around, the dirty linen has fallen off the cart and is now on the floor. I pick it up and start hearing a chair being dragged around the dining room. It was impossible for anyone to be in the dining room because I had already locked the doors going to the dining room. Someone would have to come through the kitchen and I would have seen them. So I locked the kitchen doors as fast as I could and I left to clock out, but not before I heard a giggle from the dining room. Anyways, I got home safely but had to walk through a creepy utility basement. This was a particularly intense night, but weird stuff happened all the time there. Sometimes me and my coworker would hear our names being called and we were tripped by nothing in one specific area of the dining room. And that's the end of that story. But obviously I wanted to check out the comments and see what people said. And I guess some people in like similar area of the some people in the similar area as the, you know, the poster, they said that they also work in a nursing home that used to be an orphanage. And I thought that was a pretty like crazy like
coincidence for sure right there.
Like I think like 2 or 3 people I saw like said that. But I want to say the creepiest comment I saw was someone else who said that they also worked in a nursing home. And let me just read you this comment. This is from xion_black1. And they said, I had some very creepy experiences. Some residents suffering from dementia would get mad at us for allowing kids to run around their rooms at night. And I would always notice clock stopped at 3:33.
Oh no, that's the sign right there.
Yeah.
The 3s. And okay. So 3, obviously, the witching hour, right? And then how they say everything comes in 3s. And then it's 333. 3 times. Like what is going on?
Exactly. When I read that, I was just like, what the hell? Like, that's just like a telltale sign that something's going on in that like nursing home.
Yeah, and I think it's weird because it's also like kind of ties back to the Hospicio, right? The clock stopping when somebody was like dying or something happened to somebody. Like that is a weird coincidence. And it just makes you think, like, are clocks tied to the paranormal?
I have no idea. I think maybe in some cases, like, I think it's just maybe because of the big coincidence and like the different stories and just, I don't know. And I think it's also interesting because like these places, like the people that are commenting, they're saying like, oh, they used to be orphanages too. And so with the whole like, oh,
that is another
the
weird
residents were
coincidence.
seeing like kids at night, like that's interesting to me.
Right. Yeah. And then, I mean, honestly, it could probably be explained with the fact that like spirits are known to kind of like mess with like electronic things, and we're assuming it's like an electronic clock, obviously, like the one battery. So it could be associated with that. But that's like 3 coincidence. Oh no, 3 again.
What the heck?
Coincidences again. Yeah. Nonetheless, that was a great story. Very weird. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting how like other people shared the same experience. And so with that, I'll go ahead and move on to my next story. This is by a user Horror Appeal on the subreddit r/paranormal, and it is titled Still Traumatized by the Things I Witnessed When My Grandma Was Dying. I grew up with my grandma and lived with her most of my life, and her house always freaked me out because weird things happened. It's not like the house was old. No one had ever lived there previously, and it wasn't the typical scary house you think of when you think of a haunted house. I have my theories, but that's for another time, I suppose. Anyways, everyone in my family who stayed there has their own stories of things they've seen or heard, including myself. Some examples of what I experienced were hearing footsteps outside my door in the middle of the night, hearing someone in the master bathroom walking around and turning the sink on when I was the only one home. When I was young, I was sneaking downstairs to grab a snack and turned the corner to go downstairs and saw a little girl sitting on a big box we had at the bottom of the stairs. Seeing figures of people on the walls moving around, and the list goes on. These things happened throughout my life and were spaced out occurrences, so I tried to just ignore it all the best I could. But what I experienced when my grandma was dying were some of the most intense things I've ever witnessed. My grandma had breast cancer. Eventually it spread throughout her body and she lost the battle. They put her on hospice and we set up her living room for her stay and so we can take care of her. The last week of her life is when things started getting really weird. I would be sitting on the couch next to her and see people in the corner of my eye walking past the doorway and the hallway, even when it was just me and her in the house. And when other people were there, they saw it too. There were times she would just be looking at the ceiling or on the walls and smile like she knew that someone was there. Another time my whole family was on the couch just being with her and the light in the room went out and my grandma smiled and said, "It'll come back on." And right when she said that, it did. While these occurrences were starting to happen frequently, it was just little things like that. But the last few days of her life, she started declining more. So we had bought a baby monitor with a camera to watch her when we weren't in the room to make sure she didn't try and leave the bed. She kept trying to do things on her own and would fall. Well, one night, my sister and I were upstairs in her bedroom talking, and we looked at the monitor screen, and I instantly started crying from what I saw. It's hard to describe what we saw. The only thing that comes close to it is it sort of looked like a mix of a gremlin and golem. I felt so off. We watched it almost like crawl/jump on her bed. She was asleep, but it seemed like she knew it was there because she made a movement with her hand like if she was hitting it away, and once she did, it left. My sister went downstairs to check on her. She was still sleeping and nothing was there. It was one of the scariest things I have ever seen in my life, and even after 6 years, just the thought of it makes the hair on my arm stand up and my eyes begin to tear up. It's not just because of how scary it looked, but because the way it made me feel. Even through the monitor, you could feel its presence and you could feel it was not good, whatever it was. The next night, my sister and I were back up in her bedroom watching a movie, and my sister looked at the monitor and studied it for a second and told me to look at it, which after what I had already witnessed, I was terrified to even look. But I did, and clear as day, you could see a head behind my grandma, which looked like how she looked at the time. Bald, sick, etc. So we took a picture of the monitor screen this time, and we zoomed in to see what it was, and we noticed above that head was my uncle's face. You could see his features and could easily recognize him if you knew him. He was my grandma's son who had died a few years back from cancer. While I don't really believe in God and I'm not sure where I stand on the afterlife, it was a feeling of relief seeing this after the horror I saw the other night. Almost like him saying, "It's okay, I got her." I have no idea what the head was behind her. My sister thinks it could be her starting to leave her body, and it did look like it was her just watching her body laying there. A couple days later, she had passed away. For the next month, we stayed there to pack up her house and sell it, and while we were there, some pretty weird occurrences happened from time to time. That was pretty normal for the house, and it seemed like all the insane activity that occurred while she was dying had left with her. But I will never forget the things I saw in the house during that time, and even as I'm writing all of this, I have goosebumps. I do have the pictures we took of the monitor. It's a pretty unsettling photo, and shows my grandma too, so I'm not sure if I should post it unless I'm able to cover her for the sake of my own family. And that is the end of the story. I do want to say that this user did share photos of their grandma and like what they talked about being like seen on the monitor, and I will be sharing those photos. I do just want to give a disclaimer. Obviously, this person stated that they would share it if they were able to cover the like basically the identity of who their grandma was, right? So they did black out like her face, and they offer a photo basically like, well, I guess exactly what they saw, and then they show sort of like a zoomed in image of the face like that was like right behind hers, like the head, and then what is said to be like the uncle's face, right? Or the uncle's like apparition right behind it. And so right now I'm going to be showing Samantha. So Samantha, this is the full photo of the grandmother on the monitor. Tell me what you think.
What the heck? Like,
okay,
it looks a little confusing, but like I see it.
Right, okay. And so now let me show you what they're talking about. So this is just off to the left of her in the photograph.
Yeah, that's immediately like, kind of like what I noticed, like the head behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you could see it's like someone definitely. And it's just weird.
Yeah, it clearly looks like a person, like an apparition. And I guess there's just something eerie about that, like knowing that so many weird things happened in the grandmother's house, right? And you know, I feel like they say this happens a lot. So like for children or like babies especially, they see things like obviously because they say that they're more susceptible to this stuff. They're more sensitive for whatever reason it is, right? Maybe it could be they're closer in a sense to death because of the fact that they're like...
they had just been born.
Exactly, just been born, right? And obviously the grandmother was very close to like the end, right? So that could be why so many things began to happen. And so, like, they also share another photo kind of indicating, like, who's who. So, like, the first image, or not the first image, but, like, the first head you see, they say that's, like, the thing that was behind her, which is, like, sort of, like, resemble the grandmother. Very old and, like, weak. And then they show, like, the uncle's face, which I get what they say. Like, you can make out a sort of face, but obviously they say, like, if you knew who he was, you would be able to make him out. Obviously, we don't know who the uncle was. So, I mean, he doesn't look very familiar to us, but I could imagine, being a family member, you would know and exactly who it is. But this story, it's just so, I feel it's so powerful, For one, like, this grandmother, at the end, they say, they think that, like, she tend to took, like, I guess the weird occurrences with her. And it could have been that thing that, like, the uncle was protecting her, but then in the end, the grandmother was protecting them from it as well. So, what is your take on that?
I feel like since she was, like, kind of going in such, like, a very, like, sad way, definitely, like, I'm pretty sure her family, they were having, like, trouble and everything like that. There was a lot of sadness going around in her house. And I've heard that people say, like, entities that are usually, like, I guess you could say, like, bad ones or stuff like that, like, they feed off of that energy and they tend to gravitate to that because it's just so easy to feed off of, like, that sad emotion and that possibly even, like, anger, since anger is usually a secondary emotion from sadness and stuff. So I can understand that, like, maybe that gremlin was just one of those creatures that their grandma was protecting them from, and then their uncle even came to help their grandma even protect them further and stuff. That's kind of how I saw it as.
Okay, yeah, so I like that take on it. And I did think that part of the story was very unique because when we think of, like, hauntings or haunted houses or demons or whatever, right, or, like, possessions, we don't really tend to think of them as actual physical entities, right? Like, things that you could actually see. And I thought that whole gremlin and, like, goblin thing was very weird. Like, immediately I thought, like, duendes, right? Like, something was
Same here,
messing with the grandmother, which it could be something like that, just to show that she was just bringing, maybe the grandma, like, held that supernatural, like, energy, right? Mm-hmm. Where she was just kind of, like, attracting all these sort of things. And because she was going towards, like, the end of her life, they wanted to feed off of her, which it seems like she put up a pretty good fight at the end, And first, I just want to go ahead, before we continue, right, I want to say my condolences to this user and to their families, because, I mean, losing a loved one is always hard, right, on the family and the individual itself. But I could imagine what they talked about, that, like, even thinking about the story itself, it brings tears to their eyes, because I feel like it's just one thing to kind of see your family member in the last, their last days, but then you kind of see these things messing with them, and it's just so disheartening, because you want to protect your family. And when it comes to something like supernatural, we obviously don't have, like, the facilities to, like, actually take care of supernatural things or things that we can't see, because the sister went down right away, right? So, like, she goes and there's nothing there anymore. So it could be that this thing is strictly just wanting to mess with the grandmother, or that the grandmother is actually able to, like, get rid of these things and protecting them, like we had said before, from whatever the heck it is that's messing with her.
I kind of saw the fact that the daughter didn't directly see, like, the thing they had seen, like the gremlin, the whatever they, like, referred to it as since, like, the baby monitor was able to pick it up. You know how people say, like, oh, technology, like, sometimes, like, it's able to capture, like, apparitions and everything like that we can't see with our naked eye.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of how I took it as, like, even if it was still there, maybe the daughter, or, like, the sister, was a sister?
Yeah, so, like, their granddaughter, right? The grandmother's other granddaughter.
Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have been able to see it even if it was there, I feel like.
I guess that's, I mean, you could be right on there, right? So it could be that, like, okay, I want to only show myself to the grandmother, but they probably don't think, like, oh, there's a camera on me too, so they didn't realize that, oh, I gotta hide myself from the camera as well. Mm-hmm. So I see your point on that. It could be that as well. I just thought, like, overall this story was very unique, because I don't think we've ever had a story like this before that's dealing with, like, somebody passing away and all this different energy surrounding them and the house itself. And I thought it was interesting because they said it wasn't like an old house, like, the grandmother was the only person to live in the house. There was no prior history. So it's weird, and it could be going back to that thing where like maybe the grandmother just had this like sort of not attachment, but like attracted these sort of things, right? So we talk about like our own grandma and how she just has like the supernatural just kind of like attracted to her for some reason. And with her, I know we've mentioned this before, like she's had like an experience where she's seen our Theo, even though he doesn't even live in California. He lives in a different state. And she just immediately assumed that, oh, he came into her house, and she was like, oh, sit down, blah, blah, blah. And it took her a second to realize, like, wait, you're not even supposed to be here. And I know she's told me other stories of like when other like of our family members have passed away, they will visit her in her dreams, and that she knows, she's like, okay, you're visiting me because I need to let go of you. And then she'll end up telling them in the dream, like, okay, like, I'm sorry, I'll let you rest, like, thank you, or something like that. Something along those lines, basically kind of telling them, like, okay, I will let you rest finally. And that she says that after she has these dreams, kind of telling them, like, you can be at peace now, I'll leave you alone, she will never see them again in these dreams. So there are people in this world that are like that, and it could be that the grandmother was one of those people.
I think it's also very likely that their grandma is one of those people that things just tend to gravitate towards them. And she likely wanted to protect them from what was gravitating to them since she was, passing away. She didn't want them to deal with the really tough stuff as well. Definitely a good, interesting story though. And thank you to that user for sharing it. My last story comes from the subreddit r/ghost stories from the user IDK I'm Jules. It's titled 13 Bends. Hi all, I'm pretty new to Reddit and usually just read, but I came across this subreddit and thought I'd share one of my own experiences. This is a long read, so I apologize. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and when I was 16, my cousin and I constantly went out to different haunted places around just to try to see if anything would happen. Most of the time we were scared because it was late at night and our minds were playing tricks, but this night it was different. We decided to explore the legend of 13 Bends. For a little backstory, it's located in a small town southeast of Pittsburgh with only one road in and out. 13 bends comes from miscounting each bend it takes to get in and out. Some people count 13 down and 12 up. Others have counted 6 down and 7 up. That's not the scary part. In that small town, an orphanage burnt down, and it's an active area during certain times where the kids will make their presence known. We did some digging before we left. Some people said to park where the orphanage was with a dirty car or put flour on your car, and handprints will appear. Others say to just go to the cemetery on Long Benny Road. Others even reported being chased out by a car and it disappearing before the last bend, if you counted correctly. We experienced all of the above. One summer night, we decided to call a group of friends to go to the 13 bends. We didn't bother counting the bends. We just wanted to get down to where the orphanage used to be. We sat there for quite a bit, just talking and periodically switching through static stations to see if we could hear anything in the feedback, but we couldn't. About a half an hour of sitting, my cousin heard faint giggling that none of us heard, only him. He then decided to get out of the car, which was pretty dirty from the way down, and there was 3 handprints. We all jumped out of the car and couldn't believe it. I was pretty shaken up because of every place we've been to, it's never been, real? We didn't feel like sitting in the car anymore, so we walked on the train tracks that led throughout the town. When we walked back, the car had even more handprints on it. I would say around 10 to 12, all around the car. We felt like we hit the jackpot. We weren't necessarily running to get back home though. We loved going out and experiencing this, so we immediately headed up to the cemetery. One of our friends was there previously and said she didn't experience anything when she was here, but her friends would call into the woods and ask the kids to play, and all they heard were branches breaking. Scary, but not scary. That can easily be justified. So my cousin being my cousin, he's a smartass, he decided to call the kids for a game of tag. At this point, we weren't at the gravestones, just on the path down to it. It was pretty dark, so we stayed within sight of the car. He kept egging them on, saying, "Come on, let's play tag. I know you want to. You're it. Tag me. Here, I'll turn around and tag my back." And instantly after he said tag my back, he lunged forward. We thought he was joking, but he swore up and down that he felt a hand on his back. He lifted up his shirt and there was a small handprint. Our friends at this point wanted to leave. Another friend said that I smacked his back at some point when they weren't looking and we were playing a joke, but I was internally just as scared as they were. I couldn't believe it. He wanted to show them that he wasn't joking, so he lifted up his shirt sleeve to show no handprint and started calling out again. I tagged you, you're it. Nothing happened. Minutes went by and he's still calling out, come on, we're still playing, aren't we? And he covered his arm, another handprint. And then we heard giggling. All of us, we immediately ran to the car and left. At this point, keep in mind that we were all pretty shaken up and previously didn't count the bends down, so we couldn't count the bends going back up. It's not like you can get stuck down there. It's just only one road. And then suddenly, we see headlights. My cousin was driving pretty fast just to get back into the common Willet area. The headlights came out of nowhere. It's a one-way road and we were driving fast. The headlights kept getting closer and closer the further we got out of town. And then like that, they were gone. And we turned off the road. Needless to say, we didn't really go seeking active areas anymore after that. We got what we were seeking for, and it was not worth the feeling that we felt. I'm now 23 years old, and I haven't experienced anything like that night, and it will give me the chills every time I think or talk about it. But yeah, that's the end of the story. And I thought this story was very interesting because, again, I wanted to look for stories that at least were kind of around the same area, like, oh, a story about like maybe an old orphanage or just like a creepy haunted place, or even like stories with like spirits that are like children, since, you know, the Hospicio Cabañas, they had those children spirits from the orphanage. And I thought this was very interesting story as well.
Yeah, I think I've heard of this like area before. Like when you mentioned in the story with the part about like, oh, make sure you throw like some dirt on your car so you can see handprints. Like immediately I was reminded of that. I don't know where I've seen it before, probably like on a TV show or something, where like I guess they say like the kids will push your car, right? That's why like they say to do that on the car, right?
Yeah, they had said like they did that so you could just see handprints on your car because the kids like leaving handprints.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, something like that. So it could be what I'm thinking of, because I guess the story that I remember was it could be this place or it could be another place, and you know, maybe there's multiple, I don't know. But basically I guess like these kids were killed by like a train or something, and I guess they push your car to get away from the train tracks. I don't know if this is the same place.
In the like replies and comments, I think they told a little bit more story about like supposedly like the orphanage like got burnt down, and so there's stories where like, oh, like some of the kids were in the orphanage and that's why they're there, and like there's just different stories. And I guess also like there's different places in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or just different places in Pennsylvania that this story is like, it changes basically.
Okay, so yeah, I mean that's interesting because that, like, you know, dealing with the children ghosts again, it just seems like they're playful, right? But that part where that person gets like pushed,
yeah,
right?
They get like slapped in the back basically.
Yeah, or there you go, like gets hit, like, and they don't believe him. They think that like, oh, maybe the user was the one that did it, and then he lifts up his shirt and literally has like the handprint on there. I just think like, man, like I don't know what I would do if like a ghost kid slapped me or pushed me or something.
I
like,
think I'd be like them and I'd be like, okay, that's my experience, I'm good now.
Right, yeah. And at the same time too, it's like you can't fight back, you know, you can't fight a ghost, especially a kid ghost, you know, like what are you supposed to do?
Exactly. Like I thought that part was honestly pretty crazy, like the fact they were like, it wasn't just like a one-time occurrence, like, oh, it was just on his back, but it was also like on his arm after he continued to taunt these kids.
Yeah, like it just kind of shows like this is why you don't mess with spirits, right? You know, you leave them alone unless they're messing with you, and you don't go picking a fight, because chances are you're not going to win, because obviously they can do things to us that we can't do to them.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think those are some pretty good stories that we had for this episode. So I just want to thank everybody for listening today. But as always, we always got to give you guys something to talk about. So this week, I have a TikTok that basically shows a family, or, you know, keeping in theme with our episode, a family that's being like harassed by a poltergeist, so a haunted house per se, right? And in this TikTok, they show different clips, which they have cameras set up in their home, like in the various rooms, because these people are just living with like this poltergeist, like this ghost. They have multiple videos on their TikTok showing the different occurrences, and in a specific video that I'm talking about, this is by the TikTok user Laney_and_Ben. They show that like things are flying off, like countertops, desktops, doors are swinging open. The thing that is like pushed off of the desktop is being moved around, and then it cuts to like what I assume is probably the kitchen, and then it knocks over like a bin full of cans, and you hear the cans rattling everywhere, messing with the cans even more. And then if you look off to the right of the video, the door is open, that door just slams shut, and you can physically hear it just like slam together, right? Slam close. So this family is just living with whatever entity is going on, whether it's one or multiple. They just have various videos just showing these different occurrences. So Samantha, what did you think of this?
When I saw these videos, I immediately just thought, like, that's what I picture. Like, if I had a poltergeist in my house, this is what they would be doing. This is how they would be messing with me. And I mean, like, it's pretty crazy that they have like just so many videos just showcasing like this paranormal activity. And definitely check them out for any further updates they have on this.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, this is a family like TikTok, right? Like I would assume like this couple, the majority of their videos do seem to like have this like horror aspect to it when it's like that. But they also have like a combination of, you know, just family TikToks like with their young kid as well. So it doesn't look like they're just dedicated to just nothing but, you know, spooky things, you know, but it's just their house. I mean, you can't really do anything when you're living in the house, you know, unless you just go out and buy a new one, which in this economy is not easy to do. So for sure, give them a follow. Check out the videos. They are pretty popular. They almost have 1 million followers on TikTok. So chances are you may have seen one of their videos. But with that, everybody, I just want to thank you guys once again for listening and tuning in with us on our Friday the 13th episode, aka Samantha's birthday episode. And once again, happy birthday to Samantha. Everybody stay safe out there. Have a happy Friday the 13th. If any of you guys are going out to the tattoo shops, get tattoos, maybe consider a spooky tattoo, right? You know,
maybe.
You know, we're always in the spooky season mood over here. So with that, I'll end by saying, if you guys do want to follow us and see the pictures and stuff that we're talking about and see the Hospicio Cabañas, follow us on Instagram at calaveriapod. And if you guys have a story to tell, remember everybody, we keep using these Reddit stories because we don't have any stories, so we have to go out there and look for some. But if you have something that you want to share with us, either if it's, you know, not a story or just something that you think, hey, maybe you guys should talk about this in an episode, send it our way. That's at calaveriapod@gmail.com. And you guys can also follow us on Twitter and TikTok at our same handle, calaveriapod. And again, you guys, our TikTok just seems to be popping off all the time. So if you're not following, you're missing out.
And if you guys want to support the show, feel free to follow us, leave a review on, I know an Apple Podcast, you can leave a review. I'm not too sure about Spotify though. But
yeah, I believe you're not able to on Spotify.
But yeah, feel free to support us. If you want to leave us a review by sending us an email, that's fine too.
Yeah, you know, we always welcome emails. We told you guys, we've only received one so far.
And yeah, thank you guys again, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
See you later, everybody.